Around 1268 BCE, the Queen of Egypt, Nefertari, beloved of Mut, died. The cause of her passing is unknown. It could have been a variety of factors: complications from pregnancy or childbirth, a long-term illness, or maybe an infection caused by an animal. A snake bite, a scorpion sting, malaria spread by a mosquito. One of these, or something else entirely, may have hastened her journey to the west. Just for a moment, let's imagine the Queen passed from an infection, something caused by an external force, say an animal bite. In that hypothetical scenario, the royal physicians would have turned to a most interesting treatment: a magical story. The physicians of Ramessid, Egypt employed many tools to treat their patients. We explored some of these in episode 215, looking at external injuries like battle wounds. On those issues, the doctors had a robust, practical understanding. They could realign parts of the skeleton, relieve swelling, and stitch wounds, and apply antibacterial treatments like honey to prevent further infection. When it came to internal problems, like disease, the ancients had a more limited understanding. They lacked the tools to study and document bacteria or viruses, and their knowledge of human anatomy was surprisingly limited in some respects. You might think that because of mummification, the Egyptian doctors knew all there was to know about the human body and its organs. Sadly, that's not quite the case. Egyptian embalmers were a separate profession, and they primarily worked in the dark. When beginning that mummification process, a mortician would cut a small hole in the abdomen, then reach inside, blindly feel around, and pull out the organs they could reach. But the Egyptians did not autopsy their dead, cutting them open entirely to see how things fit together. And there were many internal organs that the embalmers would miss. Organs further back in the body or protected by membranes that the embalmer rarely penetrated. We explored some of this in 2022 in an interview with Dr. Bob Breyer. Anyway, given their limited knowledge of internal functions and the causes of illness, the ancient Egyptian doctors frequently turned to other methods, magical methods. One tool that the doctor could use was a divine story, a tale of gods and goddesses that involved injury or illness, and the magic that cured it. By invoking this divine healing, the doctor, or magician if you prefer, could pass that healing on to the patient. One of these tales appears during the early 19th dynasty, the days of Ramesses II. It concerns the goddess Iset, or Isis, and is commonly known as the secret name of Rah. But you could also call it the time when Iset poisoned the sun god. It is a delightful tale. The story of Iset and the secret name of Rah is preserved on papyrus and ostraca from the Ramessid period and later. Remarkably, it seems like we have the full story, beginning to end, which is quite unusual for Egyptian myths and most of their texts. Thanks to a hefty dose of luck, the tale of Iset and Rah has endured the long millennia. The story comes to us as a magical incantation, something to be recited when a patient has suffered the bite of a scorpion. As the animal's venom courses its way through the patient's veins, the physician or magician could recite this tale in order to invoke the divine magic. It begins as follows. Quote, "Words spoken by Serket, or Selket, the scorpion goddess. Formula of the supreme god, the one who came into being of himself, the maker of the sky and earth, of water, the breath of life, gods and humans, the maker of flocks and herds, serpents, birds and fish." End quote. The story is told to us by Serket, the scorpion goddess. The logic here is that because the patient has suffered a scorpion sting, it is the magic of Serket and her knowledge of this story that can be used to heal the injured. The tale takes place in that long ago age when Ra himself ruled upon the earth. This was before humanity rebelled and Ra withdrew into the sky, becoming the sun disk we know today. Ra's reign was long, countless years, and over time the god himself became old. It is here that the story proper begins. Quote, "The goddess," Iset, plotted in her heart to know the name of the noble god, Ra. Now, Ra went every day before the crew of his court, being established upon the double throne of the dual horizon. But the divine old man bowed down his mouth, and his saliva dribbled to the earth. His spit had been dropped upon the ground, so Iset scooped it up within her hand, along with the earth that was touching it. She formed the saliva and dirt into a noble snake, making it with a tail shape. She made it come to life in front of her. She left the snake at the junction of a road that was crossed by the great god, as he went, at his heart's desire, upon his two lands. One day the noble god arose outside, and he wandered, as he did every day. Then the snake bit him, the living fire that had come from he himself, and the fire raged through him." End quote. Iset, the Great of Magic, or Weret Hekau, poisons Ra with his own life force. As Ra is aged, he occasionally dribbles a little bit, and Iset uses that spit to make a poisonous animal. After all, what force in heaven or earth could possibly injure Ra, except for his own essence? As a wise woman, or Set Saret, and Great of Magic, Weret Hekau, Iset would understand that dimension, and so she turned Ra's own power against him. Anyway, Iset made the serpent bit Ra, and now the story continues. Quote, "The Great One opened his mouth, the cry of his person being Ankh Wedja Seneb, life, prosperity, health. The cry reached to the sky. The gods' council, or Ennead, came running, and they said, 'What is it? What is it?' Ra could not find his mouth to answer. His lips were shaking, all his limbs were trembling. The poison had taken hold of him completely, like the Nile flood sweeping all before it. At last, the great god summoned up his courage, and he called to those in his following. He said, 'Come to me, you who exist from my body, the gods who came forth from me. Let me tell you this form. Pain has struck. My heart knows it, but my eyes cannot see it, nor my hands make it. Nor do I recognize this pain from everything that I have made. I have tasted no illness like it. Nothing could hurt more than this.' Ra continued, 'I am the eldest son of the eldest. I have many names, I have many forms. I am the one whose form is in every god. I am the one who is called Atum Horus Hekenu, or Atum, the Horus of ointment." End quote. These kinds of declarations sound formulaic, but they do serve a purpose. Ra's central dilemma is that he is the creator of everything, including all the gods, and yet he has never experienced a pain or a power like this. Statements like these are important to make the next part more effective. Now, Ra moves on to the central issue, his name. Quote, "My father and my mother told me my name, and I hid that name from my children. I hid it within my body to prevent it happening that a male or female magician should strike against me. But behold, I went outside to see that which I had made, the world, and to wander in the two lands that I had created. But then something I do not recognize struck me. Have the children of the gods brought to me, the ones who are effective in words and expert in their speaking, those whose wisdom reaches the sky." End quote. The world knows Ra by many forms or manifestations. Ra of the day, Khepri of the morning, Atum of the evening. And as the creator, his essence is within every other divine being that exists. But the true name of Ra, the core of his identity, that remains secret. This is important because in Egyptian religion and magic, the name of a person or thing was a core part of their identity. It was not simply an appellation or identifier, it was part of their very essence. The Egyptians would not understand Shakespeare's idea that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Maybe functionally, yes, but a rose by another name is not the same entity. Subsequently, in Egyptian magic, if you do know the true name of something, you are able to exercise power over it, which, if you're the creator of the sky, the earth, and everything within the cosmos, that's a problem. Imagine if some hostile entity came to know of Ra's true name. Hypothetically, they could control Ra himself, and thus control his creation, or even undo it. So Ra's dilemma is very real, and if he cannot resolve it safely, that has major implications for the world. Within the story, Ra clearly suspects that some powerful entity, a being of skill and knowledge, has engineered this attack. And so he summons the deities, who have those skills and knowledge, to appear before him. These summons included Iset. Quote, "Now the children of the great god came forth, each of them within his confusion," that is, ignorant of how to help. Iset came forth with her powers, and her speech, which is the breath of life, her utterances able to repel pain, her words that bring to life anyone with a choking throat. Iset said, "Divine Father, what is it? What? Is this a snake that has bitten you? One of your own children that raised his head against you? Well, they can be felled with effective words of power. I can cause the poison to retreat from seeing your light." End quote. In the next paragraph, Ra tells Iset what has happened to him, but he's just repeating information we already know, so I'll skip over it. Then the sun god says something interesting. Quote, "I was bitten by a snake, unseen. It is not fire nor water, although I feel colder than water and hotter than fire. All of my limbs are in sweat. I am shaking. My eye cannot hold steady. I cannot see. Rain pours down upon me in the middle of summer." End quote. The idea that Ra himself, the great creator, could be in such pain that he has a fever beyond everything must have seemed terrifying to the divine council. Notably, the sun god mentions that his eye cannot hold steady and that he cannot see. This is probably a reference to solar eclipses, which in Egyptian mythology were often described as Ra temporarily going blind, as if his eye had been blocked. So this is one of those stories that reveals the ancient Egyptian conception of the world, and one of the reasons why solar eclipses themselves happen. Every time an astronomical body blocks the sun disk from our sight, it is a cosmic recreation of this very moment. Anyway, the story continues, and Iset's plan unfolds. Quote, "Then Iset said to Ra, 'My divine father, tell me your name. A man lives when he is called by his name.' To this, Ra replied, 'I am the maker of water, so that the great ocean could take form. I am the maker of the bull for the cow, for their rutting or mating to take place. I am the maker of the secret sky of the horizon, the one who placed the souls of the gods within that horizon. I am he who opens his eyes and there is light, who shuts his eyes and there is darkness. I am the one at whose command the Nile flood strikes. I am the maker of hours for day to exist. I am the separator of the year, the one who creates the seasons. I am the maker of the fire of life, to enable the work of the house to take place. I am Khepri in the morning, Ra at noon, Atum who is in the dusk. I am the one whose name the gods cannot know." End quote. Once again, we get that astronomical reference. When Ra opens his eyes, there is light. When he closes them, there is darkness. day and night. And we get a nice summary of Rah creating and organizing the world. Then we get that essential statement of Rah's forms, Khepri of the morning, Rah of the daytime, and Atum of the sunset. Finally, we have the central theme repeated. Rah's true name is something that must remain unknown. Unfortunately, Rah has chosen not to reveal his name to Iset, and so the god's pain worsens. Quote, "At this, the poison was not dislodged from its course. The great god was not soothed. So Iset said to Rah, 'Your name is not among those things that you have told me. Tell me the name. The poison will leave a man when his name is pronounced.' Now the poison bit in with its bite, more powerful even than the burn of fire." End quote. The poison spread, the pain raged. Finally, Rah relented. Quote, "Then the person of Rah said, 'Give me your ears, my daughter Iset, for the emergence of the name, from my innards to your innards. And if it happens that you desire to reveal the name, do so only to the sun, Horus, after you have bound him by a divine oath, so that he may be granted his 2 eyes. Thus the great god raised up his name therein to Iset, the great of magic." End quote. In his agony, Rah submits, and Iset achieves her goal. But the sun god has one condition. He will tell Iset his true name, but she must not share it with any god, except for her son Horus, especially on a day when Horus needs healing. This will come back later in the mythological cycle, and I'll discuss it in a moment. But in short, Rah submits to necessity, and Iset is more powerful than ever. Having achieved her goal, Iset springs into action. Quote, "The great god raised up his name therein to Iset, great of magic. And she said, 'Fail, scorpion, go out from the god. Burning of the mouth, I am the one who made you. I am the one who sent you. Fall to the ground, poison, for I have power. Behold, the great god has raised up his name therein. Rah lives, the poison dies, because Rah said his own name to Iset, the great lady of the gods." End quote. As the story comes to its conclusion, the medical practice here on Earth needs its own resolution. So the final section, when Iset declares, "Rah lives and the poison dies," also includes a short section that states something like, "So-and-so born of so-and-so is alive. The poison has died." So for the medical professional here on Earth, this divine story is part of the treatment. You can imagine the medical practitioner standing over the patient and reciting this story aloud. Then, as the tale reaches its climax, perhaps the doctor leans down so that the sufferer can whisper their private name. Then, the doctor can expel the poison through the magic of Rah and Iset. Of course, in some circumstances, one might remove the venom of a snake or scorpion bite by sucking it from the wound and spitting it forth from the mouth. The treatment doesn't prescribe anything specifically like that, but you could imagine something working by analogy. Just as Rah proclaims his name and Iset declares her magic, perhaps the doctor would ritually spit the venom away. That last part is speculative, but I wonder if they did something like that. Finally, just in case we forget any of the medical aspects to this story, the text wraps up with a prescription. Quote, "These words should be spoken over an image of Atum Horus Hekenu, and an image of Iset, and an image of Horus. Write these on the hand of the bitten patient, then lick them off. And likewise draw these gods upon a strip of the finest quality linen, and place it at the throat of the patient. Then prepare the herbal remedy, using the scorpion herb. Grind it into beer or wine, to be drunk by the patient that was bitten by the scorpion. It is effective on 1,000,000 occasions." End quote. In our world, the medical specialist would take a reed pen and draw figures of deities upon the patient's hand. They are specifically named as Iset, her son Horus, and a version of the solar creator, which is Atum Horus Hekenu, or the complete one, Horus of the ointment. Then, before the ink had dried, the magician would lick the figures off, presumably taking the power and magic of those divine beings into their own body. Along the same lines, the magician would bring forth a piece of linen, specifically in good quality. They would draw the same deities upon the fabric and then place it at the patient's neck, to draw the god's attention to the sufferer and use their magic to repel the poison. Finally, the specialist would prepare a remedy. They gathered a herb called Semu Wechat, literally herb of the scorpion, which might be safflower seeds. The physician would grind this herb, whatever it was, into dust or oil, and then pour it into a jug. They would mix that together with beer or wine, and the formula literally says Genket irep repu, which is beer, wine, either or. Maybe that was just to avoid using water, which was more likely to be impure, or maybe the pain-killing effect of alcohol, especially in wine, was an intended outcome. Either way, it sounds like a fun prescription. So, the magical story and the treatment was complete. At this point, the patient's recovery was in their own hands, and the care and attention of the gods. The physician could only hope that Iset the Great of Magic gave her attention properly to expelling the venom. Hopefully, as the prescription says, this was one of the millions of occasions when the treatment would be effective. That brings us to the end of the story and its mythological component. There are a couple of points that I'd like to break down in a bit more detail, but if you'd like to step off the ride, now is a good time to do so. For those departing, thanks for listening. Everyone else, I'll see you in a moment. The tale of Iset and the secret name of Rah is a curious one. It's actually one of my personal favorites. For one thing, we get a really interesting perspective on Iset herself. When it comes to popular conceptions of Iset, she is often viewed as a wife and mother first and foremost. The tale of her husband Osir, or Osiris, looms large in the mythology of this goddess, and her mourning for Osir, her reassembly of his body, and her conception and birth of the son, Heru, or Horus, usually takes up the other half. But stories like this show us Iset acting on her own agency, doing things for herself. And what we learn about her as a personality is quite fun. In this story, Iset is the Great of Magic, and she is a wise woman, but she's also kind of ruthless. The goddess straight up poisons the creator, just so she can learn his true name, and potentially have power over him. The goddess may be trustworthy, and she's only going to share this knowledge with her son, who is destined to rule, but it's certainly a disruptive, even rebellious act, and in the larger mythological context, that's quite interesting. When humanity rebelled against Rah, he went on a straight-up rampage, dispatching his agents to slaughter humans. When Iset rebels against Rah, there is not, as far as we know, any punishment for her. In fact, you may have noticed, at the very end, after Rah reveals his name, the goddess begins her treatment, and as she drives out the poison, the goddess admits that she is the one who fashioned it, that she made the serpent that caused this. The story doesn't engage with that point, but you have to imagine, was Rah so out of it with pain and delirium that he didn't notice Iset's admission? Or did the outcome of that story kind of negate any punishment? Once Iset knew the true name of Rah, she potentially had power over the god, so there was really nothing he could do. I have to say, I'm quite fond of this unscrupulous Iset. It adds a lot of personality to a mythology that can often be quite obscure. Another interesting point shows up in the storytelling itself. You might have noticed a curious inconsistency when it comes to the animals involved. According to the written version, the story is told to us, or to the magician, by Serket, the scorpion goddess. And throughout the tale, we find Iset and Rah referencing the poison of the scorpion, or wechat. And at the end, the medical prescription specifically commands the doctor to prepare the scorpion herb, semu wechat. And yet, the animal that Iset fashioned, and the one that actually bit Rah, that is described as a snake, or jedfit. It's a curious inconsistency, and I wonder if the version of the story that survives is actually a later one that has become slightly corrupted through repetition and different storytellers. It's not the most important detail, but it's a fun little quirk, and it might reflect the way that these stories were actually told and transmitted orally by practitioners. Now we have two larger and more important points. The first one concerns Horus. When the sun god Ra reveals his true name to Iset, he commands her to not reveal it to anyone, except for her son Horus, and Ra specifically mentions an occasion in which passing this knowledge on will, quote, grant the god his 2 eyes. Now, for those unfamiliar with the mythology of Horus, one of his great undertakings was a series of battles against Sutekh, or Seth. The two struggled against one another to claim the kingship of Egypt. This took place after Ra had withdrawn into the sky. During the course of one of those battles, Sutekh set upon Horus and violently removed his eyes. Now, Horus' 2 eyes eventually get restored to him, but it's one of the darker moments in his journey, pardon the pun. Throughout that battle, Iset is a constant companion to her son, trying to support and assist him to claim the kingship. Apparently, Ra knows that injury will happen in the future, but it seems like at least part of the reason he gives Iset the name is so that one day she can pass that magic on to Horus, ensuring his victory and his assumption of the kingship. In that sense, the story ties back, as so many Egyptian myths do, to the divine nature of the pharaoh, the legacy of monarchy, which has descended from Ra, and the stability of the earthly world. That stability might be disrupted by rebellious goddesses, but ultimately, order, or ma'at, prevails, as it has done on a million occasions. Finally, the story as a whole kind of raises an interesting theological question. When Ra is in the midst of his delirium and Iset asks him for his name, he lists off a string of appellations or titles, things like Ra of the day, Khepri of the morning, and Atum of the evening. But as Iset notes, none of those is actually his name. And of course, at the end of the story, we, or the reader, do not learn what the true name is. But the way this information is presented, I personally find quite interesting. When we talk about the Egyptian gods, we refer to them using the words that show up on temples, in tombs, on papyrus, and other written records. Words like Ra, Iset, Horus, and so forth. But most of the words for Egyptian gods ultimately derive from some other noun or phrase. For example, Ra simply means the sun. Khepri comes from the verb kheprer, to manifest or come into being, just as the sun manifests at the dawn. The name Iset probably derives originally from a noun meaning seat or place, although subsequently evolving linguistically. The name Heru, or Horus, ultimately means the one who is aloft or on high, and other names like Jehoti or Thoth derive from an early precursor that probably meant to be bright or to shine, like the moon with which Thoth was associated. The point here is that the story of Iset and the secret name of Ra raises the tantalizing possibility that none of the words by which we know these gods are actually their true identities. Instead, they are more like descriptors or titles. You can use them, and the gods will respond to them, but they're not their names. Those are something hidden. This has been discussed in great depth by scholars like Eric Hornung in his book Conceptions of God in Ancient Egypt, The One and the Many, or Jan Assmann in his book The Search for God in Ancient Egypt, and various smaller studies that I'll put in the bibliography. So this is just the tip of the theological iceberg. But the point is, the true names or identities of the god don't seem to have been written down. It appears to be a kind of select priestly knowledge, something restricted to the highest religious authorities, and presumably the pharaoh, but never revealed in any public forum. This is a topic that I want to go deeper into, but it's quite a rabbit hole, so I'm going to save it for the future. Suffice to say, the notion that the names we use for the ancient Egyptian deities are not truly their names is a deeply intriguing one. Thank you for listening to the History of Egypt podcast. The show will return in 2 weeks as we continue the next chapter in the reign of Ramesses II. Before I go, I'd like to extend a special thank you to the fine folks who make this podcast possible. In 2026, the History of Egypt podcast is majority funded by my patrons. Thanks to their generosity, I am able to pursue this as my full-time job. And truly, I am most grateful. Every day, I wake up looking forward to doing this, and it's all thanks to you. I must give extra special thanks to the priests. These magic workers give at the highest possible tier, and their support is unbelievably generous. My thanks to Mycost, Terry, Dan B., Eric, Karen, Frank, Alicia, Jeffrey, Nidin, Erjan, Ashley, Yen, Setnacht, Veronica, TJ, Carlos, Andy and Chelsea, Dan S., Erin, Suyon, Kate, Chris, Yola, Jean, and Linda. Folks, I am in your debt. May Iset, the Great of Magic, bestow her power upon your life and ensure that you are forever protected from scorpions and snakes. I would also like to welcome a new member of the priesthood. My thanks to Andrew, who recently joined the clergy. Andrew, you are most generous. May Seneferu, the one who makes beautiful things, enrich your life to come. If you want to support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/Egypt podcast. Or you can help us out in other ways by leaving a review on your podcast app of choice or simply telling a friend. As always, thanks for listening.